I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up.
Hello and welcome to the DevTech Diaries podcast. I'm your host Andrei, and today I'm going to be talking about the journey from zero to senior software developer. There are a number of stages in between these two, the beginning of the road and the end of the road. And I'm not the one doing the dividing. This is pretty much how it works in the industry, with some variations of course, but by large, every company kind of does the same thing. We have 4 levels. Well, they are really 3, but I added a 4th one, which is your pre-dev stage, when you're not actually a dev. So you might be someone who maybe works in a different industry, doesn't do any coding, your job has nothing to do with tech, for example, but you want to become a junior dev. And if that's the case, I do have another video on this, which I will link in the description of this one. That's basically stage 1. You're not a dev yet, but you want to be a dev yet. Stage 2, you're a junior dev. Step 3, a mid-level dev. And 4, and finally, the senior dev. Of course, it's not the last chain, the last link in the chain, but these are the main kind of stages that you have to go through. And some companies even take it further. At every stage, they have some sub-stages. So, for example, if you're a senior dev, you might be on, towards the beginning of the scale. Then as time passes and you learn more and more, you become more senior. There's usually a scale which dictates how much you earn as well, starting from, I don't know, whatever salary they've got, and they take you up via some sort of increments to a higher wage. So that's pretty much how most companies work anyway. And most developers kind of fit into one of these categories. Now, if you are not in the industry yet, there are a number of things you can do. And this is what I want to talk about. How do you progress from that stage to the second one, where you are employed as a developer and you've generally become a junior developer, right? What should you do to land your first role? Now, I've covered some of these things already, as I mentioned before. However, I'm probably going to mention a few more things now as well. My advice would be to focus on getting the first role. And how do you do that? Is by having a laser focus on something. First of all, you have to decide what kind of developer you want to be. And that's not always possible, but let's say that it is. Software development covers many things, but by large, you have a couple of things you can start with. You could work on the front-end side, or you can work on the back-end side, for example. Now, if you let me explain what this means. Let's imagine that you look at a website, right? You're on the internet, I don't know, your bank's website, let's say. A website like that is made up of several components. The first one is the look and feel. What does it look like? The colors, the branding, the elements on the page. And this is the user interface. That's what you interact with. Then there's the backend thing. Now, that is something you don't see, but that dictates how that particular website works and what does it do once you click on elements, once you navigate to other pages, once you do something that requires some sort of result, right? So this kind of stuff is usually hidden in the background, in the back end. You don't get to see it because obviously it can create some sort of security issues if you see how the code works, and it's generally hidden away. And that might be done with a backend language, something like C#, like Java, like whatever, or it could be JavaScript. So JavaScript could be used as a front-end and back-end kind of language as well. So the first decision for yourself is, what do you want to be? Are you interested in the look and feel? Are you more interested in a designer kind of role, or are you the guy or the person who codes and who likes the functionality side? Now, once you make that decision, you start learning as much as you can by yourself. Now, one thing that should be clear from the very beginning, a large number of developers are self-taught. And what does that mean? It means they haven't gone through any kind of formal training. They haven't gone to a university. All they did was they learned via YouTube videos, via blogs, articles, various communities. Maybe they joined a Discord channel and help each other, something like that. And that's what I mean when I say self-learn. I mean, nobody really learns to code by themselves. They have to do they need some sort of help. Someone is to produce the content that these people consume. And that's generally other developers who have been through the same thing themselves. So most developers are like that. How do I know this? Well, I'm using the data from the Stack Overflow survey. So every year, Stack Overflow, first of all, this is the main website used by almost everyone, pretty much everyone, I would think, as a developer. It's where you go and you ask questions, you have a problem, you might get some help with code, and generally that's a platform to get help with. And every year they publish a report, and you can have a look and see what the report says. And it's actually quite interesting to see because they give you the numbers. So if we look, for example, at how people learn, you get to see some very interesting numbers. Most people, right, learn by using online resources. So in the latest report, which is 2022, we've got 85% of people learn by using online resources. And of course, it's further divided by age groups as well. So, and actually, as people get older and older, the numbers start to change a little bit, and maybe they start going to a school, maybe they actually read a book, which I know in 2022, that's almost unheard of, reading a book to learn something. Online learning is basically the way to do it, right? If you've got someone who starts a bit older, that's only two situations really. It's one, they switch careers and jobs, or they finish school, they've gone through professional training, maybe they've got a bachelor degree, maybe they went further and got some sort of master's or PhD or whatever. And of course, when you do these things, your age goes up, which means you start later. And that kind of explains why those numbers are where they are. So this is a public survey. You can have a look and see for yourself. The point is, a very large proportion of people learn by using online resources. So that's actually very interesting, which means that if you have the aptitude for it, well, you can be a developer with no issue whatsoever. The first hurdle in your path, however, is getting that first job. And that's what I'm talking about now. Your focus should be on getting the first role. And you do that by searching around you. A lot of companies at this point in time would hire remote, okay? Maybe not 100%, obviously, but there will always be companies in the area where you live that you know of, maybe, that someone that works there, and that's basically a good way to network and see if you can get in as well. I'm not going to go into too many details at this point in time. The other video that I've done on the subject talks about these things in detail. Point is, have a plan, have a strategy, decide what you want to learn, focus on where you want to work, see what their recruitment process is, and do what you can to get in. That should be your focus. And of course, you need to spend as much time as possible by learning and getting better, even if you don't have a job as a software developer yet. You have to prepare. There is a bit of an unfair expectation at this point in time where junior developers specifically are required to actually have quite a bit of experience. I've seen that quite a lot. The ads might mention 1 or even 2 years of experience, which of course you're not going to get unless you work in the industry, but you can't work in the industry because you need experience. So you have this old problem of, okay, where do I start? Chicken or the egg? How do I do this, right? So you have to give yourself the best chances. But let's assume that you managed to get your first job. And now, well, congratulations. You are a junior developer. You are actually employed as a developer. What do you do at this point? At this point, you need to be very clear of what you have to do to progress to the next level. Yes, you've just got your job, but you still need to keep an eye on the price. Ideally, you want to have a couple of years of experience. That's the sweet spot for anyone who is in that kind of position. If you've got a couple of years of experience in the industry, that opens up a lot of doors for you. At this point, you can pretty much go and get a job without much difficulty whatsoever, because you now have the experience. So you got your first job, and hopefully it's a decent one. Plan to stay in it for a while. 2 years, I think, would be ideal at this point, if it's not a horrible place. But assuming it's a good place, you feel you're learning, you're growing, all good, then yeah, stay for a couple of years. Doesn't matter, the pay is relevant at this point, as long as it's high enough for you to be able to live and support yourself, and whatever dependence you might have, that's all good. But the point is, in your first role, and especially when you start in this career, the money should not be your focus. The money comes later with time. Once you have the experience, the money won't be an issue, but you need to get there first. That's what I'm saying. Focus on learning, focusing on yourself, focusing on determining what you want to do, and you will realize that once you start working, there will be many things that you will need to learn that you were not aware of. There are many components which come together to actually produce a working application. It's not just one thing. So that's what I mean. You stay in one place, you kind of see what's going on, and you start to learn about all these little things. And that gives you the right experience to move forward later. But that's how you start. So give it 2 years if you can, and learn as much as possible. Now, at this point, I wouldn't worry too much about how much time you spend working, for example. I would say work as much as possible, because it's all for you, really. It's your learning. I'm not saying work yourself into the ground until you can't take it anymore, and until you fall down because of depression and exhaustion. No, that's not what I mean. What I mean is, you should try and do as much as you can and learn as much as you can. So you might actually decide for yourself, even if nobody asks you, you might decide that actually, do you want to do a bit more? Maybe you want to work a bit more in the evenings. Maybe you want to work a bit more at the weekends, because you need to get those 2 years of experience, and you need to learn as much as possible. This is the time when you're learning, right? When you're accumulating, when you're preparing for the rest of your career. You have to put in the effort. There's no other way around it. You just have to do it. But just keep your eyes on the price. Okay, so now you are in a junior dev, you stay there for a couple of years, and then you have to make a decision. Now, hopefully the company that you work for will already have a plan in place for you. And by that, I mean, you should be reporting to someone, which could be a senior dev, hopefully not someone who is not a developer. You need help at this point. So hopefully you report to a senior dev. If that's the case, you're going to start having one-to-ones, or you should anyway, and they should have a plan in place for you, which kind of states very clearly what you need to do and what you focus on in order to progress to the next level. And the next level being a mid-level developer. If you don't have that, then you're going to have to make it happen. And by that, I mean, there must be someone you report into. Obviously, everyone does. So you're going to have to start asking the questions yourself. What do I need to do? Okay. What is the structure in the company, and how do I progress my career? What is the process? Every company might have a different process. They might have something very different, but there's something they can actually talk to you about and tell you what you need to do and what you need to learn and how that will work, and even how much time they expect this to take. Okay. It's not going to be 3 months, but it's probably going to be about a year at least, if not more than that. Point is, don't let this slide. You have to own this. Okay, you have to keep an eye on this. So once you know what the requirements are, now you need to know now who to focus on them. One thing I always advise developers is to always act as they are the next one level above. So if you're a junior dev, you have to start working and you have to start behaving as you are a mid-level one already. And of course, that's not going to happen from day one, but it will happen. After 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2, it will happen. So once you start functioning at a higher level, that tends to get you noticed. If it doesn't get you noticed, and if it doesn't give you anything, you're still winning, because you are ready for the role, because you've been doing the role, and you're going to be doing this role, but you will be doing it for someone else, right? You will look for another role, and this time it's going to be a mid-level in terms of things that you need to do and in terms of pay as well. So that's kind of how it works. If it doesn't work where you are, that's fine. Just work yourself out of there. But you still need to put in the time. Remember what I said. Give it a couple of years once you get the first role. because that's the most important role that you're going to have. The way you start kind of dictates everything else. Okay, so now let's say you've done your 2 years, you've learned a lot, you're much more confident now, and you become a mid-level dev. What do you do at this point? Well, at this point, you have a lot more responsibility than before. You're not going to be working just by taking direction anymore. You will have some sort of freedom to decide, to make some decision on some small things that relate to the code base in some way. So you will still report to someone who is a senior developer, more than likely, but you will be given a lot more trust and a lot more responsibility because you've grown already. You're not a junior anymore. Your hand doesn't need to be held all the time. You know, you don't need someone to look at everything you've done because you didn't really know a lot. No, at this point, with at least a couple of experience behind you, sometimes even more than that, you will have a very good idea of what you're doing. So now you do the same as before. You start preparing for the next level. Exactly the same thing. You find out what it takes. You find out what you need to focus on, and you start working on those things. But you have to start acting as a senior dev at some point if you want to become a senior dev, because that's what gets you noticed. And by that, I mean, you're going to have to come up with ideas. You're going to have to go ahead and do things without having too much information from someone else. You might get a bit of direction. You might get a bit of a push in a certain direction, but by large, you will have to do a lot more by yourself, basically. Now, at this point, it doesn't really matter how much more time you spend in a role. I would advise anyone roughly to not kind of leave before a year, at least a year in any place, basically, unless it's a really terrible place, because those places do exist. But let's assume you are in a good place. I would not leave a job in after less than 1 year. Because otherwise, you know, the eyebrows start to get raised, and you want the conversations to focus on the things that you do and you can do and you learn, not other things. So at this point, you're a mid-level developer. You've got a clear idea of what it takes to become a senior. You do the same as before. You learn, you study, you get involved. The important thing is to get involved and not just let other people tell you what to do. So you have to take some initiative at this point, especially as a mid-level developer. You might see something that's not quite right, make a suggestion. Maybe try something new, maybe implement something. Start and learn other things that you don't know about. I have another video on DevOps, for example, so maybe you want to learn a bit about that. You want to get involved in this. And maybe you want to understand how your pipelines work. Or maybe there are no pipelines at all and you want to, create some. There's always room of improvement in any company, either process or tools or ways of doing things. There's always something to improve because no company is perfect. It is what it is. So that's what I mean. You've got to get involved. You've got to get out there and you have to get noticed by doing the right things. And even if you fail sometimes, that's fine, but at least you try something. And the result of that will tell you a lot about the company. Are you encouraged to do this? And if yes, even if you fail, and if everything is good as long as you learn something, then you are in the right place. Okay, so now let's say all these things are happening, you become a senior dev. Well, what do you do at this level? Well, at this level, as a senior dev, you have a lot more responsibility. Again, you notice the pattern, your responsibility list grows. Now you might actually start to mentor other people. You might start to work with junior developers yourself, people who were like you, when you were in their shoes. So at this point, what I would advise is always remember what it was like for you. Remember your experiences and remember what made you feel good and how you learned. And those are the things that you want to duplicate, and you want to treat your junior devs the same way you were treated yourself. I'm assuming here you were treated in a good way. If you're treated badly, then of course you don't want to do that. But even then, there's something to learn, and you will learn how not to deal with junior devs. Okay, remember how things made you feel, and that's how you treat other developers and other juniors who are starting on the same path as you. Try and put yourself in their shoes, and you can help them. You can help them the same way you were helped yourself, the same way you learned yourself. Now you can help them and even make their path a bit easier and a bit quicker as well, because with the right mentorship, with the right experiences, things progress a lot quicker. Now, at this point, of course, again, you're not going to be surprised if I say you're going to start preparing for your next role. What that next role will be, well, that will be the subject of another video because it's an entirely different subject. These 4 levels that I've been talking about, not a dev yet, junior, mid-level, senior, these are fairly standard in the industry. There might be multiple stops along the way, but by large, like I said, every company has this kind of a career progression. And after that, it changes quite a bit, actually. The only thing I would say is always remember how you started, remember how you learned, remember what you've done, remember what you focused on, and do the same thing for other people. But now you have to make all decisions also in where you work and how does it work, what other things you want to learn, and these things will dictate how long you stay in a place. As long as you are in a place where you learn and you progress your career, then it's all good. If you're not learning, if you're not progressing your career, if you're not earning enough, it's time to get out. Basically, that's how I look at it. Every role is more sometimes a choice between I learn or I earn. What do you want? It is possible to get both, especially if you work in a company that pays really, really well, but most people don't. So you kind of have to prioritize. And you will notice in this industry, we always have to learn. So you have to keep learning at all time. You can't let it slide. You can't, because otherwise you get left behind. So now let's look and see. I'm going to share with you something so you can see what happens in terms of wages, let's say, and progression over time. So I remember when I first started, but we're talking 15 plus years ago. When I first started, right, I was on £19,000 a year. That was my first salary. And I stayed there for over 2 years in that particular place. I've done what I'm preaching now. I've basically done myself. I learned things. Not everything was nice, and not everything was shiny, but that wasn't important to me. And the important thing was to learn and prepare for the next stage, which is exactly what I'm talking about in this video as well. My next job after that was on £25,000. So we can see there's a jump of about 34%, roughly. I haven't done the exact math, so there might be some mistakes in here and there, but the point is there was quite a bit of a jump. And of course, don't forget, we're talking 15 years ago kind of levels. Don't look at it now. You wouldn't be starting on 19,000 now if you were to start as a software developer. It would probably be more than that. Next job, 28,000. Now, that was mainly me trying to do something else and work on my progression a little bit. Didn't quite work out. But even so, the jump was still about 12%, which is, fairly decent. Third one, 28 went to 33,400. Now that's a 20% jump. Now the salary level is not very high, of course, not by today's standards anyway. But look at the percentages: 34, 12, 20. And actually, I have a few more, so I'm going to go through a few more. There's another one, went to 40,000. That's a 20% jump. 40 to 45, 12% jump. And finally, from 45 to 62. But that's when I went into finance, because for finance, especially in UK, pays quite a bit more. All the other ones were like digital agencies or small places, but then finance for bigger companies. And that was a 45% jump. So if you see, we're talking here quite a few years at this point. So probably about 6 or 7, probably more kind of years of data here. But every time I made a jump, there's been quite a jump in salary. Because with experience, with the time that you spend, with the learning that you get, you're worth more and more to an employer. So you've got to take advantage of that. And of course, the main problem is that if you stay in one place, which is what I've done, obviously stayed for several years, you might actually get very small increases. You might get a 1 or 2%, might be a bit of a small bonus as well, 2% or whatever. But you see, the numbers are much lower. The way to actually make money is to keep learning, keep developing your skills, and then applying for roles which offer more. That's my experience so far. If you just stay in one place, they never keep up with inflation, they never keep up with this, and you just earn less over time. So my other advice would be keep learning, keep studying, keep improving your skills, and keep changing jobs. It is what it is. I mean, I can't advise you to stay in one place when you get very small incremental increases, when you could be getting, 12 to 20% just by switching, and sometimes even more. It doesn't make sense, right? So yeah, unfortunately, it is what it is. That's how the industry works. Okay, so let's see what else. We've covered the levels. We've covered a bit of salary history and jumps. I think this is probably enough for today. This will be published obviously on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. I think I'm on about 6 or 7 of them, which is quite a lot. I'm hoping you got some value out of this. And I'm hoping that you will at least get some ideas on what to do at every level. For now, I want to thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you and goodbye.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show